It's funny how events catch up with events, how events in the real world catch up with events in the art world, and how events in the art world struggle to keep pace with those in the real world. But the circumstances under which this exhibition, Antidote to Noise, is being presented kind of underscores the message of the show itself. The show is being seen mostly by people watching this video, that the circumstances of the coronavirus quarantine is preventing most of the people we had hoped to visit the space, and that they realize also that during the run of the show, the exhibition will be open to visitors on weekdays.
Hi, I'm Astrid Preston. This body of work is my most abstract work that I've done. They're all oil on wood panel paintings, and they were inspired by a trip several years ago to Japan, actually right after Fukushima. And we traveled and visited as many islands as we could, heading away from northern Japan. That was my first time experiencing calm water, just getting involved with the reflections in the different temple gardens. It was a very calming experience. With the reflections in the water, that I could use nature in an abstract way, because the water is naturally abstracting, and it was a good introduction for me to go abstract and still deal with realism in the way I wanted to, or illusion. And then this led to exploring textures. So a lot of the pieces have textures in them. And also then there's this addition of starting to think about flowers, and I added floating worlds in my landscapes. Someone said, oh, those look like kiku, which is a chrysanthemum, and it's the national flower of Japan, or the royal flower. So anyway, that's how I'm dealing spatially, trying to have the texture, having to have flat space, and having in these also the information from the wood. The grain of the wood is also adding liquid sort of element. In terms of the show, Peter curated it, and he chose my most abstract work for the show. It ties in with everybody else's work, also using a variety of materials. My palette is not subdued, but it's very calming anyway. So I love this space. The gallery right now is just walk in and just feel like you're in another place right now with the virus going around. And everyone has the stress, and walk in and it's calm, gentle, and provocative at the same time, which we want.
Hi, my name is Margaret-Anne Smith, and this is my work that we're standing next to right here. All of the work here relates in one way or another, and it is very pragmatic. It all started as an ink drawing and worked from there. And the sculptures are not actually symmetrical, although they may be mathematical. They were all drawn freehand, and then I tidied them up, and they became a maquette before they became large sculptures. And then the stones that you see over here, I wanted to use them against the side of the sculptures to hold the sculptures in place when they are placed one on top of each other. In order to figure out how to cut them and divide them, I started actually painting photographs of the stones so that I could work out where to paint the actual stones. With Astrid's work, I have a piece on the ground of small test pieces of stones that came out in a more interesting way than I'd anticipated, and the colors really seem to go very well with her work. And all of this is quite meditative work. It's quite slow, it's quite time-consuming, and it's a very quiet place to go. For me at least, I feel very calm when I do it, and I'm able to focus a lot of attention on it.
Hi, I'm Laurie Yehia. I'm an artist who works with objects and paint. The theme Antidote to Noise, which is the title of our show, is very much what my work is about. It's focusing on what we're looking at, where we are, and paying attention. So the switch plates in my work are emblematic of that. The plates themselves take on an aspect of form, design, and also just a way of seeing things in other contexts and deconstructing the way that we usually see things and allowing ourselves to enter into the possibilities of how we can reconstruct our inner and outer worlds. The switch plates are both forms, and also they are objects that retain traces of their functionality, yet in a new context can be seen entirely differently. And the spaces in the switch plates allude to where in our inner consciousness or world we can actually make changes, switching the way that we experience the world, our inner world and our outer world. I've worked with objects for many years now, from light and wires that I used as, and cords that I used as linear elements, to the switch plates themselves, which have taken on this meaning for me that is very important. In today's world of chaos and a lot of noise, I feel that it's really important to be able to stop, pause, and find that quiet place of looking at what's right here and how we can just find the vitality in being right here. And that is really what I'm trying to do with my work.
Why does this show benefit in spirit from the terrible goings-on outside? Because it proposes that there is an antidote to this kind of noise, that in real terms, self-quarantining, hunkering down, sheltering, cocooning is not simply an appropriate response to events, but is or can be a tool for self-harmonizing, you might say, reaching a harmony within oneself and with oneself with the world.
My name is Segal. I'm an artist and a poet, and sometimes I'm a poet and an artist. And this body of work happened one day when I was at my computer editing a poem to read at a poetry reading that night. And the two art practices are in many ways similar. They're both additive and subtractive. That night, because I had a deadline, I was being more strict with myself in regards to what I discarded from my poem. When I made my way through the poem, I was in front of my monitor, and I saw that what I had created on the monitor screen was a square. I had been in my art studio for a couple of years working on primary shapes. I had been through circles and cylinders, and I was working on squares, cubes, grids. I could recognize a square when it showed up. So when I saw that, I realized that this was the way for me to get language into my body of work, which is something I had always wanted to do and was waiting for the organic way for it to happen. So here I had a square of poetic lines, and I realized I could make an element out of it to use in the studio. The poem never became a poem. The poem became the basis for all of these black and white patterns that you see. What it really is the same lines that I reconfigured to be a square, and then made 4 iterations using that one element over again and over again and over again. And then I was launched. I was into this body of work. The crows are there because crows are part of literature. It's been always between literature and the art studio. There are crows. One day, again, when I was at my computer writing, a crow perched on the top of my skylight, scrambled to stay up there, and suddenly I was underneath a crow and able to take photographs. Crow got in. Crow had already been into my poetry. Suddenly crow was now into my artwork. When I make these interlaced patterns with the poem, they are representations of the language that they used to be, that I speak, and they're also representations of the crow speaking his language. Art is a visual language as much as poetry, and we communicate with it. It's in our literature, it's visual, it's audio, it's what we read, and here it is.
The artwork in this exhibition points to and exemplifies this kind of harmonizing. It, by and large, relies on an orderly formal language, or several formal languages, all of which are related, that irrespective of the presence of referential imagery and objects, that structure and balance are what these four artists share. You could call it a kind of a new classicism, a classicism that postdates the original classicism, neoclassicism, and post-neoclassicism. So this would be a kind of a neoclassicism that lets the idea of order be as important as order itself, and that proposes that order can be found and built with anything, out of anything, and in any kind of language.